The internet is awash with Albert Einstein quotes. Some of them are profound in nature, some of them are incredibly witty, and some of them are just downright hilarious. The only problem is, many of these quotes were not actually said by Einstein. Yep, a large number of quotes attributed to him are actually cases of misattribution. That's why I wanted to make this video, to separate the quotes he did say from the ones that he didn't, so that you can see Einstein's true thinking in all its glory. But before I do, first you've got to remember to subscribe to my channel. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. This is probably one of the most repeated quotes of the modern world, and its genius is beyond question, which is likely why everyone loves highlighting that Einstein said it, even politicians. The only problem is there are no known links linking this quote to Einstein. You see, the quote as we know it, so the one linked to Einstein, first appears in 1981. A newspaper local to Knoxville, Tennessee, released an article describing a meeting of Al-Anon, who are an organization designed to help the families of alcoholics. The 12 steps of Al-Anon were shared within this article, along with some comments from attendees. One of those comments was from a female attendee who used that most famous of quotes to reject the second step. But the crazy thing is, the words were her own with no mention of Einstein. That means the quote could very well belong to this unknown female attendee. Now, in terms of how it got attributed to Einstein, it appears to have happened in the 90s, though nobody is quite sure when or where the attribution first emerged, just sometime in the 90s. Though quote investigator says that maybe it was the Austin American Statesman, which is a newspaper local to Austin, Texas. But it's impossible to say, really. All we can say is that the quote probably does not belong to Einstein, and the reason that we think it does is probably down to a mistake made by a journalist in the 90s. Only two things are infinite: the universe and human stupidity, and I'm not sure about the former. I think everyone at some point has heard this quote, and it is a pretty hilariously brutal quote. After all, at times it does seem that human stupidity can know no bounds. We wouldn't fight so many wars otherwise. But the question is, did Einstein actually say this? Well, to answer that, we have to see where the link to Einstein actually comes from, and that link is a man named Friedrich S. Perls, who was a prominent German psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. You see, Perls in the 1940s wrote a book entitled Ego, Hunger and Aggression. And in this book was the quote. At the time, he didn't name who said it, just that it was a prominent astronomer. But he would later clarify that that prominent astronomer was indeed Einstein. That means, unless you doubt Perls' attribution, the likelihood is this quote does legitimately belong to Einstein. The difference between stupidity and genius is that genius has its limits. This quote is similar to the previous one and is a great quote. The only difference is, unlike the previous one, there is zero evidence of any kind linking it to Einstein. You see, the quote itself, or at least a version of it, has been around since the 1800s, and most attribute it to a man named Alexandre Dumas Fils, who was a famous 19th century French novelist and playwright. Now, in terms of when it was first attributed to Einstein, it's hard to say, but it appears to have come in 1994 when an Iowa newspaper named the Gazette attributed the quote to him. Considering this, the likelihood is that somebody in the 90s, perhaps the person who wrote the article attributing to him in the Gazette, confused the previous quote with this one, and ever since, Dumas's quote has been attributed to Einstein. If A is success in life, then A equals X plus Y plus Z. Work is X, Y is play, and Z is keeping your mouth shut. If you haven't seen this quote, you have not existed on the internet. And the great thing is, Einstein did legitimately say this. The proof is resounding. He said it during an interview with journalist Samuel J. Wolfe, and that interview was published back in 1929 in the New York Times magazine. I actually highly recommend reading the interview if you wish to see Einstein's skillful use of both wit and humor in action. Everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. This is a cool and witty quote, and it would be pretty awesome if Einstein had said it. The only problem is, the quote has been around since at least the late 1800s, yet the first known attribution to Einstein came from a man named Matthew Kelly in his 2004 self-help book entitled The Rhythm of Life. That means the probability is Kelly made a mistake with the attribution and Einstein never actually said it. Men marry women with the hope they will never change. Women marry men with the hope that they will change. Invariably, they they are both disappointed. This is a crazy popular Einstein quote. It literally pops up everywhere, and there is so much truth to it. It would make perfect sense if a genius like Einstein had said it. However, the problem is, it's very difficult to find any evidence that he did say it. In fact, the quote itself appears to come from a play named Sayonara, which was first performed in London back in 1930, and Einstein was not linked to it at the time. The first time Einstein was linked to it came in 1982, when a comedian by the name of Mort Sahl said during a performance that Einstein said it. The only problem is, Sahl never provided any evidence Einstein did say it. So unless he knew something that we don't, the likelihood is he either made a mistake in attribution or he was just joking. With fame, I become more and more stupid, which of course is a very common phenomenon. This is a brilliantly self-depreciating comment, and the amazing thing is, Einstein did say it, and there is absolute proof. Back in 1919, he wrote a letter to physiology professor Heinrich Zanger. That letter contained the aforementioned quote, which means we know 100% that this quote belongs to Einstein. Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. This is a genius piece of life advice. The great thing is, just like with the last quote, this was actually said genuinely by Einstein. He gave the advice to his son Edward via a letter he wrote to him in 1930. I should add, the letter was originally written in German, so there is debate over the exact translation, but the essence of the quote is accurate and all Einstein. The only reason for time is so that everything doesn't happen at once. This is a brilliantly witty quote, and it sounds like something Einstein would say. The only problem is, it's hard to find any evidence that he did so. The first signs of the quote appeared to come in 1919, when early 20th century writer Ray Cummings wrote a fictional story entitled The Girl in the Golden Atom. It was published in a magazine called All Story Weekly, and it basically contains some dialogue where the quote is made, but it was not linked to Einstein, and there are no known links to Einstein. That means Einstein most likely did not say it was just somebody at some point, which we have no idea when or where, mistakenly attributed it to him. The hardest thing in the world to understand is the income tax. This quote is brilliant, and I'm certain everyone can agree with it, which is likely why it's so commonly shared across the internet. But it must be a fake, right? After all, Einstein was a mathematical genius, so no way would he say this, right? Well, wrong. This is actually believed to be legit, though there is a caveat. You see, the link to Einstein first emerged back in 1963 when Times magazine published a letter by Einstein's accountant, Leo Matterdorf. In that letter, Matterdorf recounted a discussion with Einstein and his wife, and that discussion involved Einstein jokingly making that exact quote. But obviously, this is a second-hand account of something Einstein said, so there's no guarantee these were his exact words. Even still, it's pretty epic that Einstein said something along these lines, as it shows you not only an insight into his true personality, but just how confusing taxes really are. Whoever undertakes to set himself up as a judge in the field of truth and knowledge is shipwrecked by the laughter of the gods. This is a brilliantly witty quote with such depth and meaning, and the great thing is, Einstein did actually say it. Yep, this is a legitimate Einstein quote, a resoundingly legitimate one. It was part of a direct contribution he made to a 1953 publication commemorating the 80th birthday of a German rabbi and theologian named Leo Baeck. Now, I should add, on its own, it is perhaps taken a little out of context, as Einstein was very much talking about the power of prejudice to affect people's opinions, and how because societies fill people's heads with endless contradictions and prejudices, it's impossible to be a true judge of truth and knowledge. But even still, the essence of this quote is near enough on point for what he was saying, so it is legit. The majority of the stupid is invincible and guaranteed for all time. The terror of their tyranny, however, is alleviated by their lack of consistency. This is yet another brilliantly witty statement, and is yet another one genuinely said by Einstein, and easily proven to be so. This is because it was another part of the direct contribution Einstein made to the publication commemorating Leo Baeck's 80th birthday. Now again, like the last one, it is perhaps taken a little out of context, as he was talking about a very specific kind of stupid, namely the kind born through the many contradictions and prejudices given to us by society. So he was saying the stupidity of our prejudices are only alleviated by their inconsistencies, but even still, the essence of this quote is accurate, meaning this quote is one of the best out there for providing a genuine insight into Einstein's amazing wit and thinking. As a human being, one has been endowed with just enough intelligence to be able to see clearly how utterly inadequate that intelligence is when confronted with what exists. Virtually everyone will have heard this quote at some point, as it is undoubtedly one of Einstein's most famous. It is also legitimate and easily proven to be so, but there is a caveat, you see. It was part of a 1932 letter he wrote to Queen Elizabeth of Belgium. However, the context of this quote is missing, which means even though he said it, he didn't say what people think he did. So he was not saying that existence was too vast for humans to understand per se. If you add the context provided by the rest of the letter, it becomes clear that what he was actually saying was that the intelligence to see the vastness of existence gives people humility, and the world would be a better place if everyone had the intelligence to gain that humility, which means even though it's a real quote, it provides no real insight into Einstein and his thinking. In fact, it does the opposite by implying he said something he didn't. We all know that light travels faster than sound. That's why certain people appear bright until you hear them speak. This quote is literally awesome, and in fact, it's my favorite Einstein quote, and I really wanted him to have said it, but unfortunately, he most likely didn't. In fact, nobody can even work out who attributed to him or even when it was attributed to him, which means, yep, unfortunately, it appears to be yet another case of somebody at some point mistakenly attributing a quote to him. When you are courting a nice girl, an hour seems like a second. When you sit on a red-hot cinder, a second seems like an hour. That's relativity. I literally love this quote. Not only is it hilarious, it is also remarkably accurate. Yep, this is a brilliant explanation of relativity. In fact, there are few explanations out there that could better help the everyday person understand relativity than this one. But did Einstein actually say it? Well, maybe is the answer. You see, the link to Einstein originated in a 1929 article by the New York Times, which reported that a story had been circulating about Einstein and the struggles his secretary had been having. Basically, his secretary was supposed to have been struggling to explain the meaning of relativity to all those inquiring about it, and the story goes that Einstein gave her this description to help her out. But did he actually do this? Well, it's hard to say, as the story was based on an unknown second-hand account, but considering he never denied it, there may just be some truth in it. Also, even if there isn't, the reality is, considering how brilliant an explanation it is of relativity, I very much doubt Einstein would have a problem with it being attributed to him. Any man who can drive safely while kissing a pretty girl is simply not giving the kiss the attention it deserves. How epic it would be if Einstein had said this, but unfortunately he most likely did not. You see, the quote itself, or at least a version of it, appears to have originated in the 1920s, with it first appearing in the Los Angeles Times, but it was not linked to Einstein. It took until 2002 for it to be attributed to Einstein. In terms of how, a book of quotes named More Sex Talk was put together by a man named James Wolfe, and in this book, Wolfe attributed the quote to Einstein, yet no evidence has been found to back up this attribution, which means the most likely reality is it's yet another case of a mistaken attribution. Education is what remains after one has forgotten everything he learned in school. I know what you're thinking. This has to be a fake. Einstein wouldn't say this, right? Well, yes and no. He wrote it in his 1936 essay on education, but he attributed it to an unknown wit, or to phrase it as he did in his essay, thus the wit was not wrong who defined education in this way. That means it's not his. He was just saying he agreed with it, but not in the way you're thinking. Context is everything with Einstein, and in this case, when context is added, it's clear he was not saying school education was pointless. What he was saying was that a school's most important job was to teach a person how to learn. So he was saying you may forget much of what you learn at school, but if the school has taught you well, what you will be left with are the skills needed to keep learning throughout your life. So the quote isn't really Einstein's, and he was using it to say something totally different to what it on its own implies. I am enough of the artist to draw freely upon my imagination. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world. This is arguably Einstein's most famous quote, and it is undeniable that imagination is humans' greatest power. It is literally behind everything, even Einstein's famous equations. But did Einstein actually say this? Well, yes, he absolutely did. He said it in a 1929 interview posted in the Saturday Evening Post. But unlike popular belief, he was not saying that knowledge was more important than imagination, and he definitely was not saying that it was better to have imagination than knowledge. What he was saying was that knowledge without imagination imagination has no real power. So he was saying that it was imagination that made knowledge powerful. To put it more bluntly, he was saying that what makes knowledge powerful is not in the attaining of it, which anyone can do, but in the having the imagination to use it once you have attained it. That means, similar to the last quote, even though this is legitimate, it actually is taken out of context, which is a shame, because once the context is added, this is an amazing quote that probably provides the most insight into who Einstein was and what powered him to make all the amazing discoveries that he did. That's all from me. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, remember to give it a like and subscribe to my channel, because the more who do so, the more of these short histories I can make. Is that a good bribe? I hope it is. I'll see you next time.